Welcome to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast, where we are always on the level. I'm your host, Brother Samuel.
And I'm your co-host, Brother Gabriel.
And today we have an amazing guest, a good friend to our lodge, and a pretty prominent Mason in Northwest Ohio, I would say, face that's seen all across the district. I would like to introduce Brother Williams. Welcome to the show, Brother Williams.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, I just have to say, hopefully the building's not too cold for you. We had some fun this morning trying to fix our air conditioning unit. It wasn't working at all, and it was about 90 degrees in this room.
Like most Masons, I'm heavily insulated personally, so cold weather doesn't bother me.
Well, that's good, because the opposite is usually a problem for me, and I'm sitting here thinking, how are we going to record in this lodge room? It's like 90 degrees. All I could think was, come in with a hose and somebody can spray us down every couple of seconds.
It's Masonic slip and slide.
You're onto something. So, Brother Williams, how long have you been a Mason?
I was actually the inspection candidate for North Baltimore Lodge back in 2000.
Wow.
That's when I got my Master Mason degree in a room filled with brothers from around the district that I didn't recognize. And now it's kind of fun to look back in my Masonic Bible and see who actually signed it that day.
And North Baltimore's a heck of a lodge.
It is. I was a young man living in Bowling Green at the time, and so I ended up down at North Baltimore Lodge.
It wasn't too far of a hike for you, but it was a little bit of a hike.
Thankfully, a couple of the older members drove me down. We were happy to pick me up and drive me.
Well, it's not easy to find. That driveway is kind of surprising. It just kind of sneaks up on you. You're just like, and there it is.
And it looks weird, and what Brother Sam's talking about, the driveway for North Baltimore just looks like you're turning onto another road. In fact, it's surrounded by houses. So
I kind of have the same problem at Oak Harbor Lodge. I've been there multiple times and I know where the driveway is, but I'm going down and it just kind of, I've passed it a couple of times where I've turned too early. I'm like, where is this driveway? Oh, there it is.
There it is. How could I miss it? It's got a huge square and compass on the side. So, you've been a Mason since the year of 2000. What is your home lodge?
So my home lodge currently is Damascus Collingwood, and I became a member there back around 2000, I want to say 6. Mostly because I was married at the time and living in West Toledo and looking to get back into Masonry. And it was all about 5 minutes away from my house. Where my mother lodge of North Baltimore was about an hour drive, and trying to convince my wife to let me go to lodge with a newborn at home, and driving an hour to lodge and back was not really going to happen.
It's a little bit of a hike.
Yeah, so I joined Damascus and found a great home there, and I actually switched them to being my main lodge, my home lodge, when I was elected into the East.
What kind of process is that, switching your home lodges? Because I know I'm a member of Findlay Lodge as well, but Genoa Lodge is my primary lodge, is where I was raised. How do you go about switching your primary lodge?
Like a lot of Masonry, a good secretary or just having somebody who understands kind of the paperwork and bureaucracy will make it extremely easy. There's a form for it. Almost all of Masonry in Ohio, there's a form somewhere in Grandview, and there is literally a form for designating a new primary lodge. And so you fill it in and you convey it to both of the lodges, and it gets down to the Grand Secretary's office, and they switch you in Grandview.
So. Was it a strange experience going to a different lodge?
Kind of, but not overly so. I had actually been, a little bit out of lodge for a while, particularly with getting married and with going to school. And so it was kind of just getting back into Masonry to begin with. And so, joining a new lodge or heading back to North Baltimore would have been, very similar. And just, I didn't know a ton of the guys at the lodges at that point. So, it was weird, but I went and visited and hung out with them a number of times and just kept coming back.
Felt like the right decision at that time.
Yeah, it's kind of nice, particularly with a young wife and a brand new baby at home, to be able to get out of the house. So
I know that feeling.
We were just joking. We recorded our cartoon episode last night, and there's a episode of SpongeBob where they kind of spoof us. And one of the jokes is why is it that Squidward is always so happy on the third Wednesday of the month? And it's because he got to go to lodge. So
Yeah.
I kind of feel that.
So you were a new husband, a new father, and going to law school while also starting your Masonic journey?
No, a little bit out of order. So I got married in 2005. Convinced a woman to buy a house with me, marry me the next day, let me quit my job 3 months later and go to law school and support me for 3 years. 2008, our daughter was born. So yeah, I guess Damascus would have been about 2009 when I joined. So yeah, it was all of that, just not all crushed together right at the beginning.
There's a little space in between.
Little space, but I was, in heading back to lodge, I was just starting a brand new law firm out of school. And, brand new baby at home, who was about a year at that point, and still relatively early in the marriage, within the first 4 years. So, and lodge wasn't something that she had seen a ton of. So, it was kind of, I'd been a Mason longer than I'd been with my wife, but just became a little strange of, honey, I'm going to go back and start doing this hobby again. So,
well, and it helps to have a supportive partner. I know I couldn't do all of this. I told my girlfriend, Melissa, I was like, hey, I have to be up at the lodge at 7:30 in the morning. Well, you were just there yesterday. I know, but if I get all of this done this weekend, that gives us more weekends in the future. And she's like, okay, all right.
Yeah. Even with my wife being an Eastern Star, that's still the same kind of bargain that I have to
you trade all the time.
It's, it's important. We tell new members to try and find the right balance. And I always try to coach any candidate I'm working heavily on that, because, wives can be supportive, girlfriends can be supportive in any number of ways. And mine is extremely supportive if I don't make her go to all the events. So her idea of hell is a room full of 50 people she doesn't know. And so she's extremely happy staying home and very supportive of me going to do that if I want to, which is great. But, it took us a while to find that right balance. And so that is something definitely to keep working on, and it will change throughout your life. And that negotiation's never quite done.
Well, in my case, mine's the opposite. Mine was always mad at me. Why don't you take me to these things? So then I took her to the Grand Master's reception, and she is the same way. 50 people. I can hardly get her to sit down and talk to these guys, and she's known them for 10 years at this point. And people are talking to her, and she just looks at me, and we got done. I was like, so you want to go again? She goes, no, you can go by yourself next year. It's like, yes, I win. She did enjoy looking for a new dress, though. She did enjoy that part of the whole thing. So, once again, a compromise. She got a new dress out of the deal. But, so we've talked about when you joined Masonry. When did you first learn about Masonry? What made you decide to join?
So when I was young, junior high or so, my grandfather joined Masonry. And, he's old school enough that he really didn't talk about it.
Sure.
At all. But, every couple of months there was a new logo on the back of his car. And, I just remember, going over, he'd pay us. We lived about 2 blocks away to come over and mow his lawn. It was, great job for my older brothers and I over the summer. And, just remember always looking at his car. And now I know it was a, York Rite medallions, Scottish Rite medallion, Shriner's medallion. And, within a couple of years, he had joined everything and become a 32nd degree Mason, a full York Rite Mason. And, now that I've become a Mason, I find it hard to picture him in a Blue Lodge. Very easy to picture him marching in parades with the Shrine Oriental Band down in Cincinnati. So, he was really my first exposure to the craft and seeing it, even though he did not talk a lot about it. So.
And a lot of those guys we're learning did not talk about it. It was very much hush-hush and very, not until the last, 10 so years that we were able to kind of do stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
And without it being taboo, of course. I don't know if there was any actual consequences to it, but judgment is definitely one of them. So,
Well, the old guard definitely gets set in their ways with any organization, but especially this one.
Well, I've been a Mason long enough now to realize, one, I've been a Mason longer than he was. He actually passed while I was in high school, so he was very short-term Mason, and my assumption is he wasn't sure how much he could talk about it. And the gentleman who brought him into Masonry certainly didn't tell him a whole lot about it other than, you're going to do this. So,
oh, okay.
And was a good friend for my grandfather and brought him into it. But so I think he may have talked about it more if he had been around longer. But
it sounds like, though, he got a really good experience out of everything. Even though it may not have been a long time, it sounds like he got involved in a lot of things, and
yeah, he was very outgoing. I mean, he really enjoyed. He was a great salesman. Started a small company and was definitely the salesperson for it, and was an extrovert. So being able to go out and do things, particularly finding a place where he could go out and he really didn't have much in the way of musical talent, but he was very happy to have spray painted some shoes, put on some Arab garb, and bang on a drum walking in a parade. He loved it. So he found a home for sure.
That's really cool.
Which can generally the Masons who don't always jive the best with Blue Lodge find their home in Shrine a lot of the times.
Which is really cool.
It is.
I have very little interaction with the Shrine. It's it always looks like a cool idea to me, but I always look at how much little free time I have as it is, and I'm like, I don't think I can sign up for anything like that.
That's unfortunately my problem. Is I did join the Shrine, but I don't have the time right now. Being a new father, having changed my career within the last couple years, it's just kind of adjusting to the point where eventually I will go back and be more involved in Shrine. I just can't right now.
Maybe one day.
Yes,
I'll
definitely.
I'll think about it. I would like to ride one of the little cars one day. I think that would be really cool.
For both you and I, Brother Samuel, it would be the most hilarious thing to see us in those tiny little cars driving down the road.
I would look like a bear on a unicycle.
And that's kind of the point.
Just put me in the Zoe costume, right?
Right. My fear is not getting into the car or having a good time in it. It's the needing to roll out or have firemen come and help lift me out. Yeah, they're just so low to the ground. I really can't see any other way than just kind of tucking and rolling.
I need you to go to the grocery store and buy butter. Why? To get out of this car.
You guys will fit, however. I've seen a picture of Isaac Demarest.
Oh, wow.
In one of the cars. And I know he's driven around in one. So if he's not particularly large for the brothers who don't know him on the podcast, but he's a very tall man. So if he can get into a tiny car, everybody can.
I can just imagine his knees folding in on themselves, and he's like, his knees are actually driving the car. It's not his feet. Oh, Isaac. Another person that we look forward to having on this show. He is a blast.
So we've talked about some of your early Masonic journeys. We've talked about your original home lodge, the lodge you went to. What do you remember about when you first became a Mason? Was there an awe-struck moment? Did you really connect with one of your degrees? I know a friend of mine who down in Findlay, he really connects with the Fellowcraft degree. Did you have some stick out moments from when you first became a Mason?
I don't know if it was really the degrees. I mean, they were certainly memorable as much as any candidate I've worked with afterwards. Everybody seems to remember about 40% of an evening. It's one of the great things in trying to talk with somebody about what they remember right afterwards. I think for me, it was the mentor I was assigned, just the amount of time that he was willing to give to me, a man that he didn't know at all, being willing to come over and coach me. And, it still sticks in my head. I'm fairly good at ritual, but it's because if he caught me with a book, he would smack it out of my hand. You know, everything was mouth to ear while we were studying. I could use the book to study on my own, but everything from him was mouth to ear, and it was a very high expectation. You know, he would not let me come back to give a proficiency to the lodge until I was word perfect. So I'm not any longer, but you know, it's that level of he cared. He wanted to take the time with me. He wanted to answer any questions that I had that he could. But there was a very high expectation that you were going to do it right. And, you know, I think getting that instilled in me was probably the biggest impact in my, you know, entry into Masonry.
Well, it's really cool that you say that, because it's funny how a mentor can really change your experience when you're coming into this organization. A good mentor. My mentor was Chris Gorsuch at Northern Light, and I was in college, just like you were. I had zero free time, and I didn't know how I was going to do this. And Chris said, "Don't worry, we'll take care of it. Everything will be fine. You're good at memorizing. I'll work with you." Because we were in DMLA, so we were used to memorizing ritual per se. It was just different. But the DMLA ritual is in plain English, because I think it's probably too hard to ask a 12-year-old to read code. I don't think it's too much to ask, but somebody would. But I just remember looking at that booklet. He would call me up and he'd say, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I have class from this time to this time." "Okay, I'll meet you this time to this time." And he would show up 3 or 4 days a week at Owens Community College. We'd go into one of the study rooms. It had to look like the weirdest thing ever, because I'm just going into this study room with this 40-year-old man, and I'm 20, and, you know, I don't care. I've known him my whole life. But, you know, we would go over everything. It's soundproofed. There's nobody in there. We'd close all the blinds. It was in one of the new buildings, and we would just sit there and we would go over it really quietly in the corner. And then when I had to go to class, he would leave, and we would do it over and over and over. And eventually that's how I got through all 3 of my degrees. And then being able to go to meetings as an entered apprentice or a fellow craft, and kind of getting to watch and see the degree being put on for other people, that was kind of a big help too.
That I think was one of the most important changes that, you know, Ohio made. You know, I heard from some of the old guys when I came in, you know, they were not particularly happy because of the change, but, you know, it used to be a lodge could only transact business in Master Mason. They would always open a Master Mason, and unless you were Master Mason, you couldn't go to lodge. And, you know, we're now able to transact business in any degree, and the one benefit in my mind is being able to bring the young guys in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're not making an entered apprentice and they don't see the inside of a lodge room except for their other 2 degrees for a year. You know, I think that's a great way to lose members.
Yes.
You know, while we're on ramping them into Masonry. And so I think that change is, you know, it's a weird one. And, you know, occasionally I'll still have older brothers ask me, like, "Well, we just paid bills. Is my lodge really supposed to do that in the EA degree?" It's like, sure, they're allowed to now. It's okay.
Yeah, nothing bad is going to happen to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's important for the entered apprentices and fellow crafts to see that. I mean, I vouched for him. That I had a friend of mine who was a fellow craft in Findlay, and he came to this lodge many times because he was waiting for their inspection to be to receive his Master Mason degree. He was even entered apprentice and fellow craft stand-in candidate for us during degrees here. He got the fellow craft degree more times than I think I've seen anyone who isn't already a Master Mason get it. And it was always interesting to see that. But it was great for him because he got to meet other brothers. He got to see other lodges. And now he goes to lodge every first and third Wednesday in Findlay, and he's happy to do it. So it's good to get the entered apprentices and fellow crafts engaged, because that's what.
And
that's
by
what's
that,
missing.
he's also a plural member here now.
Yes, we made him an honorary member.
And then a plural member.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He decided he wanted to join us.
That's even better. You can pay dues and you can elect him into an office.
Correct. He doesn't know that yet, though. We're waiting to drop that on Brother Faust if you're listening.
Congratulations, you're the new master.
Well, we might as well just close down shop now. Moving on from talking about your history in this fraternity,
Mm-hmm.
What is it about this fraternity that you love so much?
You know, it's an interesting fraternity for me, and it brings kind of a different feel for what I do in my daily life and in my life. And the opportunity to go and be with men of different generations, be with men with different backgrounds and different expertise. It's been a wonderful resource for me in my life, but it's also been a wonderful balancer of my life. I've had some rough days. I go to lodge, I talk with some people, and there's always somebody having a worse day than I am. And it, gives me a good appreciation for how blessed my life is in many ways. There's other days I know I'm the one who's providing that to somebody else, but, equally it's an amazing time where I can both feel like I'm extremely young and extremely old at the same time. And within 20 minutes, talking with a couple of the older brothers and, not quite understanding what they're talking about because it's just 2 generations between us, and then talking with a couple of the young brothers in the lodge and realizing there's, a generation between us. And it's like, oh, good. I am pretty old at this point. And it's been an interesting transition. When I joined at North Baltimore, there was only one Mason younger than me in the room. And now I'm very squarely kind of in the middle. And I've seen a lot of older Masons pass away that have been good mentors, but I guess it's, a lot of it is really kind of that balance and life experience that, I will get on my own eventually, but not at the same level that I get by interacting with so many different men and disparate backgrounds. And so it's very interesting.
So you talk about being with other generations in Masonry, and that's kind of different from your profession. I just want to get to know you a little bit more. Is there much of a generational divide in the legal profession?
So I'm really kind of a unique attorney in that I went to law school purposely to get into doing environmental law, and when I came out, I ended up doing utility law for the most part, and then got into doing property assessed clean energy, which was brand new in Ohio at the time, and now I primarily do it in Michigan. But there's probably about 150 or 200 PACE attorneys, people who just focus on PACE in the country. So
Wow.
There's not a lot of us. And I'm full-time. I'm more of a program administrator, so I run PACE programs for local governments. And so I do legal work with that, but I'm kind of in a very weird area of practice and a very a niche area within a niche within a niche. So
Nicheception.
yeah, I mean, traditional lawyers, particularly criminal law, civil law, you tend to run into a pretty wide diversity, and Ohio in particular does a great job with new lawyers when they come out. You can either take a bunch of continuing legal education classes called new lawyer training in your first 2 years, or they have a mentorship program. And so you can get matched up with an older attorney who will, be there for you. You have to meet with them multiple times throughout the year and really kind of get mentored into the craft of being a lawyer. And it
Sounds familiar.
sounds familiar. It worked extremely well. It was actually my grandfather's attorney
Oh,
was my mentor when I came into being a lawyer. And so there is that generational kind of gapping that happens. I just don't run into it as much with the area of law that I practice.
so what made you decide to go into this very specific level of law for environment?
I wanted to do environmental law before I started looking around at law schools, and chose University of Toledo, particularly because it had a concentration of classes in environmental law. When I graduated in 2008, it was right into the middle of a recession, a horrible time to try and find a job as a brand new attorney. But I was a law fellow for the Ohio Environmental Council at the time, which is a great nonprofit organization that advocates on behalf of the environment in Ohio. And it was also right when there was a brand new utility law in Ohio. And so the first thing I did in practice as a real fully formed attorney was to argue about the brand new rules that needed to be developed over the Public Utilities Commission. And from there, it just kind of I progressed down the pipe. Yeah, I started working with developers of solar and wind projects. I ended up kind of developing a little bit into a niche and then got into a deeper niche.
Well, that's really interesting. Well, thanks for giving us a little bit more insight, because we've known you in Lodge, but it also kind of helps get to know you a little bit more.
I always knew you were a lawyer. I didn't know that you specialized in environmental law.
Yeah,
which is
I'm
really
the
cool.
I'm the good kind of.
You're the good
lawyer.
kind.
Yeah.
So, to tie this into the fraternity, does your legal experience help you with your job? And Craftsman, for those of you who may not know, Brother Williams is our DDGM at the moment, District Deputy Grand Master. So he oversees a lot of things to do with the 11th Masonic District here in Northwest Ohio.
I think it can be helpful. I mean, it's gone both ways. You know, being a Mason, and one of the best things that you will see from a new member joining, and certainly was for me, getting up and talking in front of 20 or 30 people was not the most comfortable thing I could do as a young man. And now, you guys have seen me get up and talk in front of your lodge and other lodges. You get the experience of doing it, and it is very helpful not only in Masonry but in what I do for a living. So it was great to come and talk with you guys today. It's kind of a nice change up for me. A lot of times if I'm being interviewed, it's press for work, or it's testifying between to boards of county commissioners, and so this is
some reporter sticking a microphone in your face asking a very odd or non-relevant question.
one that I don't want to give a wrong answer to. So it's
That's the good news here. There are no wrong answers. There's just your opinion and how you feel, which is my favorite part of this whole thing, because unlike our other episodes, I don't have to fact check this. I just am going to take everything you say at face value, because that's what I should do.
Yeah.
However, when I'm talking about World War II, I should probably get that right.
So can you tell us a little bit about your work with the 11th Illustrious Masonic District?
Yeah.
And what you enjoy about being DDGM, or don't enjoy about being a district officer?
So this is actually my first year as DDGM. The 3 years prior was district education officer, and that was a lot of fun. In both roles, you're meant to be a resource for your lodges, but the lodges don't seem to tighten up quite as much when you walk in as a DEO. You're really there as an education resource. And district deputies, you're kind of a bureaucrat as much as anything else. You're really here to represent the Grand Master and make sure the lodges are doing what they're supposed to do. And so it's been a bit of a transition this year. I don't mind it. I've been a master of a lodge. I understand the challenges that you can run into in that. And so being able to offer advice to the lodges that I work with has been just incredibly fun. And also just seeing what other lodges are doing that are working and being able to transition that and tell other lodges, hey, you might want to try this has been great. And so I think we've got a pretty good spirit here in the 11th of sharing information across lodges, particularly through the district officer lines. And, I don't think we're quite the mystery that, the job title seems to come with once in a while. You know how to get a hold of me. You know how to get a hold of any of the deputies and have us show up. It's been fun. I like it.
So
paperwork.
So how often do you, in your role, because I always have questions for the district, because I've always kind of been intrigued by how the district works. How often are you in communication with the Grand Master? Like, do you have like a regular checkup as his representative here in the 11th? Are you in constant communication with him or his staff?
Thankfully, not often this year at all. A lot of times, and I can say in the last couple of years, sometimes if you're talking with the Grand Master a lot, it's because something has gone pear-shaped and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not being able to get fixed either at the lodge level or the district level. And so Grand Lodge needs to be able to fix things. And so, thankfully, I've not seen a lot of that. The good thing is, I've got 2 other deputies I work with in the 11th. We also have a district advisor. And so, the communication is there if we need it. Having a Grand Line officer in the area is helpful. Past Grand Masters is helpful as well. So, yeah, thankfully we haven't had to disturb the Grand Master. He's doing a great job. He gets to have a lot of fun traveling around, and I'm sure there's other headaches he's having to deal with this year, and thankfully they're not coming too much out of the 11th. So
No news is good news.
Yep.
Yes.
But it's really funny you say that, because when you really think about the 11th Masonic District, and I think we take it for granted a little bit, but just how much, maybe I would say, knowledge or wisdom is sitting there that we just don't really think about. I mean, like you just said, we do have a Grand Line officer currently going through the ropes. We have a past Grand Master that's currently active in just about everything that happens in this district. Actually, we've got multiple.
I was going to say, two of them are constantly active at the district level. There are two other past Grand Masters still alive from the 11th.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have multiple.
We have multiple from this district. And then on top of that, the amount of people that have kind of been on that district level for quite some time and have kind of, it's not, we're in a good spot.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a good place when it comes to being able to get the help you need to make something successful. I know I've had to reach out to you on multiple occasions. Luckily, none of them have been code questions, because I believe, I can't remember if it was you, but somebody said, if you haven't read the code first, don't text me about a code question first. If you need clarification, call me. But if you haven't read it, don't call me and ask me what to do. Read the code. It's right there. I think I sent you an email about the Excellence in Youth Award, and I was like, hey, do I need to send this to who and you? And you're like, nope, send it to me. I'll take care of it. And that's all it was. I mean, it was back and forth. It was great, because I had zero clue on where I was supposed to send it. I wrote this big, long letter, and I had all this stuff, and I'm like, am I going to have to present this? Nope,
Send it to the lawyer. He'll know what to do with it.
Send it in, we'll get it taken care of. But yeah, I always encourage lodges to try and fix issues or figure issues out at the lodge level first. And if the district needs to be able to be there to help out, we will.
We're always happy to see you guys.
Oh, yeah.
I know, some people, like you said, sometimes the lodges get all tight and, they're afraid of it. I've never been afraid when you guys show up. I mean, like when you show up, or John Tate shows up, or, Gerald Fish. I mean, I'm always happy to see you guys. And what's fun to me in my head is, you were at our pre-inspection, and I think I don't think we had anybody on the sidelines but you guys. And then I believe you were at our bylaws meeting change recently, and we had all those people on the sidelines. That was a really cool feeling to watch us go from, in just a few months, from
a skeleton crew to a packed sideline.
Yeah, and it's fun for me showing up. I mean, one of the reasons I tried to get out early when the Masonic year started in November last year, was because I wanted to get kind of that benchmark for where the lodges were at the start of the year, so I could kind of watch it throughout the year and see what's going on. So yeah, it's certainly nice to show up early and see it, and then come back a few months later and see the activities you guys had talked about, coming to fruition, and seeing, more brothers in seats. So yeah. It was great to come out.
About the time we came up with the idea for this podcast.
Yeah. So just to tie back to the district level, because you've had experience at the district for several years, one of the things that our younger Masonic generation has been trying to solve is the question of communication, which I know that the district really likes. But one of the questions that we have is, do you think it would be not better, but maybe more efficient, more streamlined if positions like the Grand Lodge and the district didn't change every calendar year? If maybe there was like a couple years per term for those levels, instead of policy changes and edicts that come out every year on the year and change last year's edicts and stuff like that. And it's not a critique of the district or the Grand Lodge. It's just a question, because I know some other states, some other Grand Lodge jurisdictions have slightly different terms for Grand Lodge lines and district lines.
I do think one of the best things I've seen in Masonry since I've been a member is watching our Grand Lodge, our Grand Line officers the amount of change from one year to the next in policies is not as volatile as when I was a younger Mason coming in, or at least it doesn't feel as such. And I think it's because the Grand Lodge, the Grand Line have gotten better at thinking and long-term planning. And, it's to become Grand Master in Ohio, I mean, it's not, we don't pull some guy from the sidelines. It's typically you're appointed in line and you're kind of mentored through that for 7 or so years. But the interesting thing, and I didn't quite see it until I was district deputy, of how much the Grand Line officers do, and how much work they do together. And so I think they've gotten better at doing that. And we're seeing there are some changes from year to year, but not quite as much on at the grand level. At the district level, we've been pretty good, in that we've had traditionally 3 DEOs and 3 DDGMs, and so it's a good couple of years. Your first year as a DEO can be a little eye-opening. Your first year as a DDGM can be a little eye-opening, but you end up in the same role for a couple of years. And one thing I think we should constantly take a look at is we tend to rotate the DEOs and DDGMs around the lodges, get them exposure to different lodges and how things are working. And I do think it's important for some of that stability. If a lodge is having some trouble and is working well with a particular team of DEOs and DDGMs, keep them in place for another year. If they're going to be reappointed into those roles, I don't think it's a bad thing to repeat.
No.
So
No, yeah.
Well, and it's nice to see similar faces, because I remember when I was a young Mason, I knew the guys who were our DDOs and our DDGMs. I knew who they were, but I didn't know them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were constantly, one year they were this, and then the next year they were doing something else, and then they came back to doing something else, and then they went back to doing the other one.
Yeah.
And I couldn't keep it straight.
Yeah.
And it was kind of nice because I took a hiatus for a couple of years and kind of found my zen, believe it or not. And then when I came back, it was really nice to see guys like you and guys like John Tate and like guys who I knew. We were at Camp Masonry. We were getting bit by mosquitoes and putting on degree work, and it was miserable. But we had a blast doing it. But we were kind of nobodies. We were just having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And to see those guys that I knew had a passion, and I'm not saying the guys before them did not. It's just kind of for me, it was nice to see these guys in the spot and go, we're in good shape. I know these guys. I know their heart. I know what they're into. And it's nice to see it. And I hope going forward it continues that way, because I think I can see nothing but good things for the district going forward.
Well, I think it's always a good challenge and a good reminder for you at this point, and for anybody who's been in the craft for a number of years, to kind of remember how you felt as a young Mason when you didn't know anybody. Getting them to know people, getting them to come out and travel to other lodges, to district events, getting them to get that level of comfort, and realizing that some of the guys that they're coming in with should end up in leadership roles down the road, because I don't want to do this all the time. I've thoroughly enjoyed when I show up at lodge right now and I have no responsibilities other than my home lodge. I'm the junior steward. It's great when I show up and just walk around. I don't have
responsibility at all. It's great.
Yeah, it's. But I think it's very important to remember as we mentor and bring guys into the craft that they may not want to be in leadership role right away, but getting them to be comfortable with, it's the district deputy showing up isn't this high, all-powerful being. He's a brother Mason.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, that's really powerful, because that's the kind of message that we like to send, especially with this podcast, is that we're all on the level, we're all brothers, and just some brothers are doing district stuff, some brothers are doing shrine stuff, some brothers are doing Grand Lodge stuff, some brothers are sitting on the sidelines mentoring.
And I've always equated it to, because there's some people that are like, oh, well, why isn't, Brother Syme at all of our meetings, and why isn't this and why isn't that? And I'm like, listen, you got to understand, it's like a 3D chessboard, okay? And we're all playing on the bottom rung. I know how to play chess, okay? But if you told me that I had to play chess on 2 boards and that the pieces could float, I have no idea how that works right now. But the district guys are playing that. And then Brother Syme's on a whole nother level. He's now playing on a 3rd rung and jumping between all 3 boards. I can only imagine how confusing that is, which is why I'm always like, listen, we got to pick up the slack for him. Anything he doesn't have to worry about, he's doing us right. He's doing his job for our lodge. We put our faith in him that he's going to represent us well. Let's hold down the fort here for him so he's got somewhere to come back to after all of this. So he can sit in that chair and just, we can have him stand up and go, and he can go, shut up. I'm going to go sit on the sidelines, leave me alone.
I think one of the best things in Masonry in Ohio is the Grandmaster's, I think it's Medal of Honor recipients. To be eligible for it, you really cannot have ever sat in the East. We give, I think, one of those out a year. I think maybe there's a total of 5 in Ohio. These are men who have made a massive impact on their lodge and on Masonry, and they've never been in a leadership role. And, we've got one of those over at Toledo Ford Industry, Jimmy Crispin. And if you ever meet Brother Crispin,
I know Brother Crispin very well.
Yeah, he's trained most of Toledo Ford Industries candidates over the last few years. If there's anything wrong with the building, it's him and maybe 1 or 2 other guys who are doing it. And so having that example of leadership and leadership roles at the district, at the Grand Lodge level, they're positions that are there to help out. But you can be a leader in your lodge, and I love when we recognize that. And it doesn't always come from an office. Being a good brother, being a good mentor for the brothers, being supportive of the guys who want to do an office, is a key role. And I love being able to highlight those guys who've gotten that award, and the fact that we recognize them and give an award for that, I think is important as well.
So there's questions I always like to ask as we start getting through the interview, mostly because I just want to know what Masonry has always been for the interviewee. Because when you first joined, Brother Wilburn and I were still watching Saturday morning cartoons and starting early grade school. And
wow, you worded that a lot nicer than you did for Charlie.
Charlie gets Charlie's almost in the same world as Ted Corn, how he refers.
That's true. That's true.
So when you first started your Masonic journey, is there much difference between then and now in the fraternity in your eyes?
I mean,
not from a ritual perspective, not from a craft work that we do standpoint, but I mean there's obviously a generational difference. But is there a maybe a mood shift of the fraternity at all, or the members, a mood shift in the members from then to now?
It's it's kind of hard to say. I will say I'm still eating breakfast cereal and looking for cartoons. So
there's nothing wrong with that.
That's not going to change ever. I've not aged out of that. I don't plan to.
Well, you have a good excuse. You have a young child.
Yeah, she's
on the other hand,
she's really into anime, which is just awful that I have to watch some.
So sad.
So sad.
So, with Masonry, I sometimes I wonder if as guys are going through it, if they really feel, sometimes they sense that Masonry is changing, and I sometimes wonder how much it's the Mason that's changing as well, because my perspective in Masonry is different than it was when I joined. But I've done a lot more. I've seen a lot more, not only in lodge, but also out of lodge. And so the lessons don't change. The ritual hardly ever changes. Sometimes different lodges will change it in different ways, but that's why we've got a typewritten one we travel around with once in a while. This is, I don't know if it's your perspective as you're going through changing and seeing it differently, and if Masonry's always been exactly the same, or if Masonry does change a little bit. And certainly there's an element, as the brothers change over, the feel of a lodge can change. I know a lot of good men that I really enjoyed getting to know who've passed away. that were an older generation than me. And so not having them around, their influence is still felt in the brothers who knew them. But, the new guys coming in below me, younger than me, they never met them. So their influence is different. And so there's always a change in feel. But I think a lot of that may just be, as we work on ourselves, as we progress and become better men and better Masons, I think everything feels a little different to begin with. So,
well, that's really powerful, and that's really, really good insight as to kind of the intrapersonal aspect of the lodges.
I try to live with the philosophy of, if I can't look back 4 years on my life and think, what the fuck was I doing? I was a moron. I've not learned enough in that 4-year time frame.
So that's also good advice for men or Masons. So
I like this.
that's very poignant. So to kind of tie all this together, is there because on the podcast we really are doing this for Masonic history, for Masonic stories. Do you have a Masonic story or a Masonic idol or someone from your Masonic upbringing that you really look up to, that you really aspire to be?
Or it could be somebody from the past. So I really like and look up to Ben Franklin. That's one of my Masonic idols. There was a time where I was really hoping to be more like him Masonically, not his other things. But having all of that influence and being able to go around, I really appreciated that. And everybody likes George Washington. I always liked Ben Franklin more. So, but somebody like that.
I think this is a little weird and a little tough in that, I joined Masonry without really knowing anything about it because of my grandfather and wanting to find that connection with him and missing him, and always really kind of idolizing him when I was younger. And so it led me into the craft. And within the craft, I've met a number of great people that over the life I've tried to take from and emulate. You've tried to find a better balance in my own life. And so there's not one person. Dick Hall was my original mentor at North Baltimore and was a hell of an influence on me in trying to, as a young man, calm down a little bit and focus and expect that excellence in my ritual. But coming into Damascus, seeing some of the old guys there, we had a brother who would drive most of the masters nuts, Brother LeBay. But I can tell you, when I sat the East, I purposely told him, if you start to correct me from the sideline all night, I'm going to gavel you down and throw you out of the lodge. And he looked pissed. I told him, I want you to tell me everything I did wrong after lunch. And, once we closed, I went over and asked him what I did wrong, and he had a laundry list for me. And, this is a guy who had done everything, and really knew the ritual inside and out, really knew how meetings should be run. The only thing I disagreed with him is when he was making the corrections. But he was great, a great resource. And so, I think there's a lot of great people, a lot of great historical Masons to look at, but, just finding that mentorship constantly throughout your life and having it change throughout your life, I think is just kind of the way I've naturally done it.
And I really like that. I also like how the answers to that question is always different. There's always some of our interviewees have given us historical Masons. Some of our interviewees have given us names of Masons who we've never met before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love about that question, because not everyone's gonna. It's not a question to get everyone to say George Washington or anything like that.
I genuinely thought that more people would look at more historical figures for that question, but I'm gonna say probably 8 out of 10 times it has been somebody personal.
And I really like that.
And
I think that's the point of that question.
Well, and it kind of helps us because now you've given us a name. Now I want to go and I want to look into this guy and do something about him and bring that to the forefront so people know who this guy was. He's not just a name.
So much like our esteemed worshipful brother Charlie R. Murphy, you have quite the repertoire of Masonic achievements and Masonic stories and Masonic travels behind you. So
I didn't learn how to say no early enough.
Yeah, that's fair.
to not necessarily summarize your Masonic career, but to kind of give a highlight. Do you think you have a moment that really sticks out for you as a really proud moment of your Masonic career, or maybe something you hope to do in your Masonic career, or just something that really says, when I did this, this is Masonry exemplified?
I think one of my proudest moments is I was in the East when the world shut down for COVID. And, looking around the lodge room, one of the last meetings that we had before we shut down, realizing that there was probably 2 brothers in the room that didn't have, something on the list. They were saying, if you have these, stay home. I made the tough decision, and under Ohio bylaws, you cannot cancel a stated meeting, but we were not going to have quorum. And I had informed the brothers we were not going to have quorum. And like a day later, Grand Lodge shut down all the lodges. So it was nice. I didn't have to worry about not having quorum the next day. But I was particularly proud of how the lodge responded. We got into doing Zoom meetings. We actually got into having some brothers come on just to check in with each other once a week. But also, we started finding some guest speakers to come in and present on Masonic education on various topics. And we did that for, I think, about 5 weeks before Grand Lodge of Ohio all of a sudden said that you could have virtual meetings. It's like, oh,
we're ahead of the curve.
We're ahead of the curve.
We're ahead of the curve.
We didn't ask permission. We did it so we could get together and check in with our brothers and make sure people were doing well. And, I think we did a great job in keeping the brothers together and keeping the lodge kind of going through a very unique challenge, and certainly nothing that I had planned for going to become worship master. And so, I'm proud of how we pulled together. Was very happy all of a sudden I could start counting a lot of those meetings we had previously set up as actual meetings. So
that helps.
It does.
That helps. But again, it was one of the meetings. We had a brother, a New York Mason who was in Saudi Arabia, who had heard about the speaker we were going to have speaking, who was from California. And so he asked if he could join in. And so we let him in. So we had a brother visiting our lodge, a New York brother visiting our lodge from Saudi Arabia in the middle of COVID, because we went virtual. And so
that's incredible.
Yeah, a lot of fun being able to adapt and change and so still finding a way to have that brotherly interaction.
I like how your proud moment is continuing Masonry, continuing the craft, despite the terrible situation.
Unprecedented.
Yes.
No one could have ever planned for any of that.
Yeah, and that's quite a feat to have. A feat of your own leadership and organization, but also the fraternity as a whole to stick through it for that.
I also had free time and, really wanted to make sure, I was particularly lucky in working from home. Work was not overly impacted, but I wanted to make sure the brothers of the lodge were, getting checked in, still talking with each other, knowing that, this didn't disappear from their life. It's still part of life. Whether or not we're in a lodge room, we're always Masons.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, speaking of always being Masons, if you were to encounter down the line someone who had just petitioned a lodge or was about to petition a lodge, or a young Mason, quote unquote, just starting their Masonic journey, the youngest entered apprentice in the northeast corner of the lodge, what would you say to this man, either about to start his Masonic journey or just starting his Masonic journey?
The one advice that I give most often is to take your time. Masonry still moves at kind of a historic time level. We're a little slow, and sometimes for new Masons, it's tough to get used to that. I mean, just the petitioning process takes longer. It's not, you don't fill in a form and that's it. It's going to take you a while. And then I don't think there's anything wrong with taking an extended amount of time as an apprentice, a fellow craftsman, get between your degrees and getting your Master Mason. Or, frankly, I joined Masonry in 2000. I didn't join an independent body until 2016. That was the first time I joined an independent body. And so finding, the ability to resist that constant call and pull to the appended bodies, finding that balance in your life, takes time, and it's okay. We don't have to move as fast as the world is. And trust me, there is plenty of activities in Masonry. If you want to do something every night in Northwest Ohio, we can pretty much find something to go do. Scottish Rite, York Rite, Grotto, Shrine. There's always something going on. And you can get, I've seen young brothers join everything and disappear in 3 years. And so finding that right balance in the beginning and taking your time to ease into it is always the advice I give new members.
I like that advice.
Yeah, that's very good advice.
I remember when I joined, Chris told me, and I quote, "You're going to have a lot of people coming up to you and asking you to join the Grotto and the Shrine and York Rite and all this stuff. And this is what I want you to memorize and say. Like, don't even think about it. Thank you, but I have someone that will get me involved in those when I'm ready."
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Because he said, "I don't want you burning yourself out by jumping into too much stuff." He's like, "You got too much going on right now. You don't have time for this. I'm telling you this." So, and he was right. And then when I finally did kind of step outside of my comfort zone and I joined Scottish Rite, it was a blast.
Yeah.
But I had the time and I had the resources, and I didn't have 6 tests due on Monday and, a final that I didn't study for on Friday.
It's easy to become a member of everything. It's hard to become a Mason.
Yeah.
And, you need to take that time to become a Mason, and whether to, Blue Lodge, York Rite, Scottish Rite, take your time and find it when you have the time to continue to become a Mason, not just a member.
Have you ever been to any of the time capsule ceremonies for cornerstones for Masonic lodges, or for like the Browning time capsule or any of those ceremonies?
So interestingly, like 2 days before Christmas, one of the brothers at Damascus had noticed somebody was commenting about, one of our former buildings was getting torn down over off of Phillips by Mancy Steakhouse.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody had reached out and said, hey, I was over there picking through the rubble and we found your time capsule. We found your cornerstone.
Huh.
Do you want it?
Yes.
And, lo and behold, I think they had already busted it open and looked through and realized it wasn't filled with gold. And so,
Right.
But they were amazingly, nice and willing to come and drop it off. And it was like, I looked at my wife. It's like, well, we're not doing anything tonight, right? So I rounded up a couple of guys and thankfully they were able to meet me at the lodge. So I wasn't just meeting, and turned out to be two guys in a busted up old white van who pulled up middle of the night behind a lodge building. I think it was like 10 o'clock at night. We helped them pull it out of the side, but part of that, not only did they bring the cornerstone, but there was a time capsule within it. They had the box broken open, and so we got it, and then so it was really cool to see. And so I'd highly recommend any chance you get to go to those ceremonies where they're being put together is great, but also remember it's equally fun when you get to open them up later on. And so we've have over at Damascus Collingwood now, the cornerstone from the old lodge building and newspaper from a long time ago.
So the reason I asked that is that we all have pictures of our past masters. We all have paperwork sitting in old boxes. But one of the reasons that we started this podcast was to have a more personal archive, to have something tangible for the future that's not just a piece of paper or a name on a wall. So if you had to leave behind a virtual snapshot of yourself in a time capsule, or an idea of what you want future Masons to know you as, what would you want that to be?
Really, I'm pretty content being just the picture on the wall. You know, one of the things that I've loved is seeing, and I didn't feel the weight of those guys as much as before I sat in the East, but you know, knowing I'm a picture on a wall now, and knowing that those names go back, you know, 120 plus years, you know, that somebody has sat that same chair for 120 years. I think being part of that legacy, you know, not as an individual, but part of the overall legacy is incredible to me, and far, far more than any individual activity that I could be known for. You know, knowing that I was a Mason, knowing that I went through everything that every brother goes through to join, you know, knowing that my brothers trusted me enough to elect me to the East, you know, I think speaks enough volumes that, you know, just being part of that legacy, you know, being a mysterious name on a wall, on a couple of plaques, and, you know, trying to inspire young guys to go and look people up is a lot of fun. I mean, there's, you know, one, I love looking at the fashion, you know,
Oh, jeez.
where the ruffle collars come in, but also the facial hair fashion. I mean, there's some great beards and, you know,
Great mustaches.
oh God, yeah. So I love seeing some of that with the old masters.
Well, we would like to say thank you for coming and sharing your Masonic journey with us. It
Absolutely.
has been very interesting. I mean, like you said, we get to see you in the District Deputy Grand Master role a lot over the last year. It's really nice to see you on this more casual level and get to talk about you and get to know you as a person. Because like you said earlier, we're all brothers. We're all, you know, you're doing a job right now. And then one day you're hoping you won't be doing that job. It'd be really nice if you didn't walk into a room and people immediately had PTSD. We got to remind these guys that, you know, just because somebody's doing a job or a title, it doesn't make them, you know, something lofty or something that's should be afraid of. You know, we're not the stone number one from the Stonecutters. But I would really like to thank you for coming out. I know you have a little bit of a drive coming out this way, and we really do appreciate it. It's
Absolutely.
I look forward to adding this to my archive.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun to start the morning.
Thank you for tuning in to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast. As always, craftsmen, thank you for your listens, your likes, your comments, and your reviews. If you can find it within the length of your cable toe, to give us a like on Facebook, or send us a comment, or give us a review on the streaming platforms. We'd really appreciate it. And as always,
Remember, craftsmen, keep your working tools in order and always be on the level.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the Grand Lodge of Ohio, its officers, or any of its jurisdictions. They only represent the opinions of the hosts or guests.